Hello and welcome back to TriggerSmart. If you've been paying attention at all, you already know a few things. You know the sheriff that said that Tyler Robinson turned himself in has resigned. Interesting timing around that as well. You also know that Tyler Robinson's bullet, at least the fragment they say they found during an autopsy, does not match the weapon. And you've probably also heard that Lance Twiggs, as well as Tyler Robinson's parents, are supposed to take the stand for the prosecution. But what I wanted to do was add more context to this because a lot of people have already talked about the fact that the bullet fragment, they're saying, does not match the gun. But I want to talk about what that means. I want to get more in depth and dive deeper into that piece of it. And really quick on the bullet fragment detail, there's a motion and it cites that the ATF summary report stated that analysts were unable to identify the bullet recovered at autopsy to the rifle allegedly tied to Mr. Robinson. That's a Mauser 98 30-06. And it's also supposedly linked via DNA and other evidence. That is also another area where they found, I believe, between 5 and 7 other DNAs on some other stuff. And it says that the DNA is consistent with Mr. Robinson. It does not say it's an exact match. So we'll have to wait and see what comes out on that. The defense says this could be exculpatory and that they may call the ATF firearm analyst to testify. Prosecutors have not yet produced the full ATF case file or related protocols. The same filing states that the prosecution plans to call Robinson's parents and Lance Twiggs, his roommate and partner, allegedly, as witnesses at the preliminary hearing. We've also heard that the trial is supposed to be moved up 6 months. This is a quick snippet from a Wired video talking about the different types of bullets and how you can actually use them to read what happened.
When that cartridge casing is fired, the bullet is going to come out of the barrel of the weapon. This bullet is in pretty pristine condition. I believe this one was fired into a tank of water and recovered, so we don't see a lot of deformation on it, but I do see the rifling on that bullet, so I know it was fired from a weapon. As these bullets strike different targets, they're going to deform in different ways. They flatten out, they hit an object at an angle and are dented, or they pass through something soft, like this bullet and that bullet, and then sometimes when these bullets hit surfaces, they will fragment. When we're at a crime scene, tasked to determine if we have ballistic trajectories or if we have ballistic damage there, the presence of a bullet, especially a bullet that's been damaged, could help us in figuring out whether that damage was created by a bullet or from some other means.
But what he's saying there is the more damaged a bullet is, or the less of a bullet they have, maybe just fragments, the less they can identify things, because things like the rifling and the fingerprint that you get from each firearm is going to be either damaged or not present. Now, does that necessarily mean that there's no match and that that bullet didn't come from that gun? Not necessarily. And then we have something here from Backyard Ballistics, and make sure you check all these people out, obviously. But this is him talking about the forensics of a bullet, kind of like the quick version.
But the first murder case I ever worked on. Long story short, they found a dead body, and the coroner extracted from the abdomen of the subject a bullet exactly identical to this one. And they asked a much skinnier version of me. We need to know as much as possible regarding the gun who fired these. First of all, I need to clarify that in science, and in forensics in particular, certainty doesn't exist, and each of our results has a different level of confidence that has to be specified. The first aspect we check is the groove diameter. It measures about 355 inches, and the bullet is not excessively deformed, so we know for sure the gun was about 9 millimeters. Next step is the bullet shape. As you can see, this is a hollow base wood cutter.
Now, I just want to point out, for all of these pieces, if you only have a fragment, you lose a huge amount of certainty. And as he was saying, but even when you do have a bullet, there's only a certain amount of certainty based on that specific case. Everything is surrounding that case, the environment, the quality of the bullet, how damaged it is. So there's not 100% certainty just because you have access to the bullet. And if you have a fragment, that's an even smaller percentage of certainty.
The rifling, which is going to give us a whole lot of information, which can be used to exclude some gun manufacturers. Overall, there are 5 parameters. First, you have the rifling type. In this case, it is traditional, which means that the grooves have been simply cut in the bore of the gun. Other possibilities include semi-polygonal like locks, of which I'm holding a bullet, and the less common ones like multi-radials, polygonals, etc.
So here he's looking at the grooves and the rifling. And in this case with a fragment, there might be some on there, but if the entire fragment is twisted, bent, or obliterated, or if it's a very tiny fragment, you might not even see this stuff. And some of the things they may do in this type of situation, for example, is take that exact same gun, the one they say they have, the one that the FBI found supposedly. You would take that gun and you would take the ammunition. They said that he had 3 other cartridges and one was still in the gun because it was a bolt action. So if that's true, they should be able to take his exact gun they say is his, take one of his bullets and fire that, and they should be able to technically link that up to parts of the fragment, maybe. But there are other things we'll see here shortly that could possibly link it still based on composition of the compounds and things like that and the metal type, and there's a lot to it. This is a news report. This is from 11 years ago, and this just kind of shows you how advanced they were back then. So imagine what they have now to be able to identify this stuff.
Gun violence is a big problem in Milwaukee, but now Milwaukee police have the latest technology to help them catch criminals.
And tonight we take you inside the city's war on crime. Charles Benson is here to explain. Charles.
Well, it's all about being in the right place at the right time, and now Milwaukee police have real-time technology to do it. It all starts with clues as tiny as this bullet casing. Every time a gun is fired, a clue is left on the bullet casing. A clue as obvious as a fingerprint. So if I fire 10 times from the same gun, each of those casings will look identical?
Yes.
So he said every time you fire a gun, that casing out of that same gun with the same type of casing, or even different casings if it's a similar material, should be basically identical like a fingerprint of a human being. So if you think about it, they should be able to take the gun that the FBI says they have in possession. They should be able to take the ammo they say they have in possession, and they should be able to fire that and recreate it. So there's an obvious question here. If they only have a fragment of the bullet, they can't necessarily get that bullet to match back to that gun, right? Or it's very difficult to do that. And then the other side of it is you have the casing that was supposedly still in the gun because it's a bolt action. So if they have the casing in the gun, it would have a very specific signature on that casing from when it was struck. And you could do the same thing. You could grab another piece of ammo, you could shoot it. But again, how do you tie that back to the bullet? And that's where other things like looking at the metallurgy and the compounds and things can maybe link those two up. Maybe there's something unique about these bullet jackets and things. I don't know what kind of bullet it was. I have no idea. But maybe something in those in the lead type and where it was sourced, maybe that can be linked back to that specific casing that's already in the rifle. But they have a problem here right now. They have a problem where there's a separation between the alleged murder weapon, the alleged murder ammo, and even tying that back to Tyler Robinson and proving that he actually, one, pulled the trigger, two, that the bullet went towards Charlie, and three, that it hit Charlie.
It's literally just as accurate as a fingerprint.
Officer Malcolm McNeil uses a new computer system called NIBIN to find the marks or fingerprints on a bullet shell when a gun is fired.
So as you can see here, it gets very, very technologically advanced. This was 11 years ago. So obviously whatever they have now is going to be light years ahead of this. But they can actually look at it in 3D space and use probably artificial intelligence and things now to compare the grooves, the metal types, the compounds, patterns, fingerprints. So for them to say that it does not match the gun does not mean that nothing else will still push it towards Tyler Robinson or towards that gun eventually. But as of right now, it looks like the fragment itself is not able to be linked back directly to that gun.
No two guns are alike.
It's exciting work. It's something that I see as being cutting edge.
And it cuts down on valuable time. McNeil can trace a shell casing from a crime scene to a gun within hours instead of weeks or months.
Now listen to what they just said. They can do it within hours, right? So this case is being pushed back 6 months because of this new evidence about the bullet fragment and the gun, supposedly. So I want to look into why they would only find fragments, right? There's some obvious reasons why. So bullets often break apart inside the body due to several factors. Impact with bone or dense tissue. We're being told, supposedly, I don't know if this is official because this was the Andrew Colvett version of things that happened and the surgeon may have said something else. We don't have an official statement. So based on what we heard, supposedly it hit his vertebrae in his neck. So impact with bone can cause a bullet to break up. And that can cause deformation and all that kind of thing. So that could possibly be something that we could see. The bullet design. So expanding or hollow point bullets, they can mushroom and they fragment and pieces come off. And that's why they're so good for self-defense, because they're extremely deadly in that manner. We have frangible and fragmented ammunition. It's designed to break into a lot of smaller pieces on impact. A lot of it, if it hits something hard, will turn into powder. If it hits something soft, it'll break into smaller pieces, kind of similar to this hollow point. But if it was something like a hollow point or frangible ammo, you would expect to see a lot more pieces in the x-rays and the imaging and stuff they did supposedly during this autopsy. So the fact that there's only one that's found, it's not super uncommon to not find all of it, but the fact that they only found one piece, at least that's what I'm assuming, is kind of strange to me. Any type of high energy transfer, so it says even full metal jacket military style, can fragment after traveling through tissue, especially if it hits bone or begins to tumble. If the bullet fragments lose velocity inside the body, pieces may lodge without exiting. In rare, vanishing projectile cases, thorough searches, including x-rays, sometimes fail to locate any metal, but fragments are more typical when partial recovery occurs. So what this is saying is there's a chance that there are more particles, there are more pieces of the fragments, and maybe even a larger piece of a bullet that could still be somewhere in his body. Forensic pathologists recover as many fragments as possible, and then they do metallurgical analysis, that's composition of lead, copper, antimony, whatever may be in it, chemical composition to help identify bullet type or manufacturer, and rifling marks on larger fragments, though fragmentation often destroys clear striations needed for definitive gun matching. So again, those fragments make it extremely difficult, but they still have the analysis of the metal and the analysis of any chemical composition that they can use to still match things up. So when the fragment doesn't match the reported gun or ammo, this adds a layer of complexity. It could be different ammunition. The shooter may have used hand-loaded, reloaded, or non-standard ammo that doesn't match factory specs. Composition or weight of the fragment might not align with suspected bullets. We have multiple firearms involved. The fatal shot could have come from a different weapon than the recovered or reported one. And we have fragmentation limits matching. Heavily fragmented bullets frequently lack sufficient intact surface area for traditional ballistics comparison. So basically, they don't have enough sample. And secondary issues, the fragment could theoretically come from a prior unrelated injury. That's probably not the case. I don't think Charlie's ever been shot before, so that wouldn't be something there. And then testing limitations. Agencies like the ATF or FBI may report that analysis could not conclusively link a fragment to a specific gun, especially with deformed pieces. Additional tests, advanced metallurgy, or DNA on the fragment are sometimes requested. So I'm guessing there's a pretty good chance that that is what's probably going to happen at this point for the next 6 months that they tried to buy, is the initial testing was not conclusive and they cannot link it to that gun, which is basically what we heard. So the next step would be that they're going to go to more advanced testing. So I don't know if they've done metallurgy and compound testing yet. Okay, so that's something that we still need to keep an eye out for. In practice, a mismatch prompts further investigation. Re-examining the crime scene, testing other potential weapons, analyzing gunshot residue, wound ballistics, entry-exit patterns, trajectory, and reviewing witness statements or surveillance. So basically, they go back to square one. So the bottom line, fragments without an intact bullet, usually explained by normal wound ballistics, especially with expanding ammo, bone impact, or high-velocity rounds. It doesn't automatically disprove a shooting, but can complicate identification. Mismatch with reported gun or ammo suggests the need to verify whether the recovered weapon and its ammunition are consistent with the fatal projectile. Okay, that's huge. That's huge in this case, especially with all the alternative theories that are out there. They also talk about alternative reasons why this could happen. Another one is a second shooter or additional shots. Multiple guns involved with only one weapon recovered or reported. The mismatched fragment might represent a miss that struck the victim incidentally, or a through-and-through shot that left only small pieces. Different ammo in the same gun. We have accelerated rounds and things like that. Intermediate target breakup. The bullet passed through clothing, glass, or vehicle parts, bone, or another object first. I don't think that was probably the case because there was a pretty open shot from what we could see, assuming, again, that it's a shot, right? There are people that believe that this was not a gunshot at all, and maybe that there was no gun involved at all. So that's still kind of open. But you can see here, there's a lot involved in this, and I could see why it would take them, 3, 4, 5, 6 months to dig into all this again and try and link this up or try to prove that it's not linked up. It also says here very quickly that it could be a non-bullet metallic debris. Could be shrapnel from explosions, industrial accidents or prior surgeries, environmental or occupational fragments, contamination during recovery. So there are other options that could happen, but here's the big takeaway. Small or deformed fragments frequently yield only partial or class-level information rather than definitive match to a specific gun. Even when a mismatch is reported, rifling does not align or composition differs, it doesn't automatically prove the fragment is unrelated to the death. It may simply be unmatched due to damage. In high-profile cases, such inconsistencies have led to further expert reviews, delays, and additional FBI ATF testing, or arguments that the recovered weapon isn't the source of the fatal shot. And I think that is kind of where we're at this point. We're looking at additional testing, more arguments, and the possibility that this bullet fragment, if that's what it is not related to the alleged firearm. And just really quick here, the typical test they do is initial examination, which includes looking at the caliber, the number and width and depth of the grooves, rifling twist direction left or right, general shape and content of the bullet. Obviously, this is a fragment, not a full bullet, they're saying. And this quickly eliminates incompatible guns, okay? Then they do test firing with the suspect firearm. This is super important. But they also would need the exact ammo, which they say they have, right? They say they have the gun and the ammo. So they should be able to test and recreate this using that. They do a microscopic comparison, the core matching test. Examiners use a comparison microscope, 2 microscopes connected to a optical bridge, allowing side-by-side viewing of the evidence bullet and a test fired bullet at the same magnification. They look for tiny little details in rifling, any unique defects from manufacturing, wear, corrosion, or prior damage. And remember, the other source was saying that they're like unique fingerprints, so they should look identical if they're from the same gun. They also do a database search for the automated systems, National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, and similar. They will go through and they will see if there's any other evidence of other similar or exact matches for other casings and things that they've seen. So this could link someone to other crimes if they had shot other people in the past with the same weapon and possibly with the same ammo. They can also do cartridge case examination, which probably is going to happen in this case. Tool mark analysis on components if the bullets are too fragmented, so that's probably going to happen as well. And then in this case, I believe this one they said did not have a serial number. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure they said that at least the guns that old didn't have them. And then ammunition comparison, matching bullet type, jacket material, or markings to unfired rounds from the suspect. And in this case, they say they have them. And in this case, they also should have done some pretty extensive GSR, gunshot residue testing. And I believe they said they did, right? We hear a lot of things, but what's official, I'm not sure. But, you know, the fact that there was gunshot residue supposedly on some of his clothes, on the firearm itself, supposedly in his vehicle, I've heard as well. You know, all that I would have to match up to the same exact type of residue that would come from that bullet. And they have to match the bullet to the gun. So there's a lot of pieces there. So the big takeaway would be that this is a very intricate process. If you have a fully intact bullet, you have the weapon, and you have the person, and you've done all of your compound testing analysis, metallurgical testing, you have a DNA match basically from the gun, you have a bullet that matches the exact rifling and everything inside the gun, and it's a fingerprint match, then it's a slam dunk, right? In most cases. But in this case, the fact that we only have a tiny fragment, we don't know how big the fragment is, right? If a bullet's broken in half, that's technically a fragment. So it could be a tiny piece, it could be half a bullet, we don't know. But in this case, since they have not been able to link that initially, there's going to have to be much more in-depth testing on this, including the compounds and the metal type. And they're probably going to have to prove that they can shoot this weapon again and recreate basically a similar type of situation with that bullet and the gunshot residue as well. So this could be interesting. This could be really interesting, not only for the prosecution and the defense, because the prosecution has to say, this bullet doesn't match this gun, but we still think that Tyler Robinson did this, and they may have video, they may have other things we haven't seen yet, so we don't know, to be determined. And then from the defensive side, they're saying, doesn't fit, must have quit. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. There's a lot more to this than most people think, but I'm sure we're going to hear some more details, and 6 months should be plenty of time to get all of this figured out. I don't know if they'll take the full 6 months. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this around. And if you want to support the channel, there are ways you can do so down in the description. And keep an eye out for my UAP series. I'm going to get really super in-depth into the declassified UAP and UFO footage. And I guarantee most of you have not seen it. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. See you in the next one.